Imagine walking through a vast desert where the wind blows the sand and everything around you seems empty. Now, imagine that in this arid landscape, God speaks directly to you. He promises something impossible, a promise so grand, so improbable that it would make anyone doubt. But what if you decided to believe? What if, even without understanding, you followed God's voice? This is the story of a man who dared to believe. A man who, when everyone said it was too late, decided to trust in the impossible. A man whose faith would change the destiny of humanity. I'm talking about Abraham. Today, I'm going to take you with me to witness the first steps of this journey. You will understand why Abraham became the father of faith. You will feel firsthand the doubts, the fears, but also the hope and the promises that echo to this day. But first, I'll tell you in advance, this story is not just about the past. What happened to Abraham still influences my life, your life, our life. And in the end, you will realize that, in a way, God continues to call ordinary people to experience extraordinary things. So, stay with me, because what you are about to hear now may change the way you see the purpose of your life.
Abraham was not born Abram. His name in the beginning was Abram, and he lived in Ur of the Chaldees, one of the richest and most developed cities of antiquity, a place of commerce, temples, and pagan gods. A comfortable place, but devoid of purpose. It was there, amidst the sun-baked brick buildings and busy streets, that God found him. Not in a golden temple, nor on top of a mountain, but in his ordinary life. In the daily life of a man who was already advanced in years, and in the eyes of everyone, had no prospects of leaving a legacy. At the age of 75, when many people only think about resting, Abram heard the voice of God, a firm voice, but full of promise. Leave your country and your relatives and go to the place that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Think about it. Abraham was married to Sarai, his beloved wife, but the couple carried a deep wound. They had no children. In a culture where descendants were synonymous with honor and security, Sarai's sterility was a source of shame. And now God promised them exactly what they had never achieved: a family, a future, an entire nation. In human eyes, impossible. But Abraham chose to believe. The decision was not easy. He would have to leave everything behind: his homeland, his comfort, his memories, and set off towards the unknown. No map, no specific destination, just an order and a promise. With a heavy heart and his eyes fixed on the horizon, Abraham set out. He took Sarai, his nephew Lot, his servants, and everything he owned. He left behind the safety of Ur and set off on the long road that would lead him to the impossible. Little did he know that that first step would be the beginning of one of the greatest alliances between God and mankind, and that behind the heat of the desert and the starry nights, the Creator was writing a story that would span centuries and reach us.
Time passed. Abraham and Sarai, guided only by faith, arrived in the land of Canaan, a strange place populated by different cultures, full of hills, deserts, and fortified cities. Still, this was the place God had promised. But as the days turned into months, and the months into years, God's silence seemed deafening. The promise of a great nation, where was it? Sarai remained barren. There were no children. There was no sign that God's word would be fulfilled. And Abraham, already advanced in age, felt the weight of doubts. Had he misinterpreted? Had he abandoned his land, his family, for nothing? It was then that on a cold and silent night, the Creator spoke again. Abraham was alone, looking up at the starry sky. The constellations seemed eternal, distant, unreachable. That's when God said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars. If you can, so will your descendants be." Abraham, with tears in his eyes, stared up at the sky. It was impossible to count the stars. It was impossible to understand how, at that age, he would become a father. But even so, he chose to believe. And God, seeing this faith, sealed a covenant. That night, God promised not only a son, but that through Abraham's descendants, all the families of the earth would be blessed. It was more than Abraham could comprehend. It was bigger than him, bigger than Sarai, bigger than any human plan. But God had spoken, and that was enough. Time, however, would continue to test Abraham's patience and faith, and what came next would show that even the chosen ones carry their weaknesses. The promise was real, but time seemed cruel. The years went by. Abraham and Sarai's hair no longer had the same shine. The wrinkles on their faces told the story of those who had been walking in the desert for decades, guided only by faith. But Sarai's womb remained silent, empty. Impatience began to take over. Sarai, marked by the frustration of being barren, felt humiliated. How could she be the mother of a nation if she could not even bear a single son? It was then that in a moment of weakness, Sarai made a decision that would change the course of that family forever. She called Abraham and said, "Since the Lord has prevented me from having children, sleep with my servant Hagar. Perhaps then I can have descendants through her." Abraham, pressed by time and doubts, gave in. Hagar, the Egyptian servant, became pregnant, and for a brief moment it seemed that God's plan had been fulfilled in their way. But what seemed a solution soon turned out to be a source of pain. Hagar, now pregnant, began to despise Sarai. The family atmosphere became heavy, full of resentment and envy, and God remained silent. The son that Hagar carried in her womb would be called Ishmael, and although God blessed him, making it clear that Ishmael would also be the father of a great nation, he was not the heir of the promise. God's plan remained intact, even though Abraham and Sarai tried to rush it with their own hands. The lesson was clear.
God's promise does not depend on human logic, nor on the shortcuts we try to create. It happens in His time, in His way. What Abraham did not yet know is that even after the mistakes and impatience, God would not give up, and the impossible was about to happen.
The desert heat punished Abram's tents. The dunes stretched as far as the eye could see, and hope, like sand, seemed to slip through the fingers of time. It was in the midst of this arid and silent routine that something surprising happened. One day, Abram was sitting at the entrance to his tent when he noticed 3 men approaching from afar. But there was something different about them. Their faces shone with an unusual serenity. Their steps were light but firm, as if the desert itself bowed as they passed. Without hesitation, Abram ran to meet them, bowing in respect. Little did he know that he was before messengers from God Himself. With hospitality, he offered them water, bread, and rest. He prepared the best of the house, even with scarce resources. Sarai, from inside the tent, observed everything, still skeptical, still wounded by the marks of time and waiting. It was then that one of the visitors looked directly at Abram and declared, "Next year I will return, and your wife Sarai will have a son." When she heard this, Sarai couldn't contain a silent laugh. How could she? She was already old, and so was Abram. Human logic screamed that this was impossible. But the visitor, with a look that penetrated the soul, asked, "Why did you laugh, Sarai? Is anything impossible for the Lord?" The atmosphere, previously light, became tense. Sarai tried to deny it, embarrassed, but it was too late. God had spoken, and the impossible was decreed. That unexpected visit rekindled hope. Abraham, even with a restless heart, felt a certainty arise within him. God does not forget. He does not delay. He acts at the right time. The desert no longer seemed so empty, and the sky, previously distant, now whispered promises in the warm breeze of that afternoon.
Months passed, and the impossible took shape. Sarai, the one everyone called barren, was pregnant. Her womb, which for decades had carried only tears and frustrations, now housed life. Every movement within her was like a reminder that God fulfills what He promises, even when human logic says otherwise. Abraham, already 100 years old, and Sarai, 90, witnessed a miracle unfold before the incredulous eyes of the neighbors. When the boy was born, the couple had no doubts. He would be called Isaac, which means laughter. But it was not a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of disbelief transformed into faith. The laugh of someone who, even late, saw the impossible bend before God's promise. Sarai, holding her son in her arms, declared, "God has given me something to laugh about, and everyone who hears this will laugh with me." The birth of Isaac was not just the beginning of a family, it was the fulfillment of a covenant that would echo through the centuries. Isaac was not just a baby, he was the seed of promise, the root of a people, the link between Abraham and the grand plan of humanity's redemption. But along with the joy, new challenges also arose. Ishmael, Hagar's son, now grown, saw his newborn brother as a rival. Tensions inside the tent were rising. Glances were exchanged with suspicion. Abraham knew the journey was far from over. The God who keeps promises also forges the character of those who make them. The desert, the laughter, and the tears were all part of the same divine plan, where even human weaknesses became the setting for the impossible to happen. And as Abraham would soon discover, the greatest test of his life was yet to come.
Time had passed, and Isaac grew healthy and strong, and with him, Abraham's love and pride grew. The child was living proof of God's power and faithfulness. Every laugh Isaac made, every step he took, every word he uttered, everything was a reminder that the impossible had bowed before the divine promise. But it was precisely at the height of this joy that God decided to test Abraham like never before. In a silent dawn, the voice of the Eternal whispered in the patriarch's heart, "Abraham." He answered without hesitation, "Here I am." And then the command that cut through his soul like a blade, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you." Abraham's world seemed to stop. Each word echoed in his mind like thunder in the desert. The son, the boy of the promise, the miracle he had waited for all his life, would now be given as a sacrifice? But Abraham knew the voice of God, and even without understanding, he decided to trust. Without revealing his true purpose, he prepared the wood, the donkey, and set off with Isaac and 2 servants towards the indicated mountain. Each step was an internal duel between reason and faith, between desperation and obedience. They walked for 3 days, and during all that time, Abraham struggled in silence. His eyes sought strength in the sky. His hands trembled, but his heart remained firm. When they finally saw the mountain, Abraham said to the servants, "Stay here. The boy and I will worship, and we will return." Those words carried not only faith, but a silent hope. Abraham knew God is faithful, and even when the request seems unbearable, the Eternal never fails in his purposes. Abraham and Isaac climbed the mountain. The young man carried the wood for the sacrifice on his shoulders without knowing what awaited him. Abraham, in turn, carried the weight of the world on his chest. Halfway there, Isaac asked, "Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham's heart sank, but his answer was simple and full of faith. "God will provide the lamb, my son." They reached the top of the mountain. Abraham built the altar, arranged the wood, and with tears in his eyes explained to Isaac what God had asked. Surprisingly, the young man did not resist. He trusted his father and the God who guided them. Abraham tied Isaac up and placed him on the altar. Each movement seemed like a blow to his soul. He raised the knife, and as the edge of the blade gleamed in the sun, the voice of God cried out from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay your hand on the boy or do him any harm. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son." The relief was immediate, and when he looked up, Abraham saw a ram trapped in the bushes. God had provided the sacrifice. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Abraham freed Isaac, offered the ram as a burnt offering, and named that place Yahweh Jireh, the Lord will provide. On that mountain, the God of promise not only confirmed his faithfulness, but revealed to the world an eternal message. True faith demands total surrender, and God, in his goodness, will always provide what is needed. Abraham and Isaac came down from the mountain transformed. The bond between them and God had been sealed with faith and obedience. And from then on, the history of humanity would continue to be marked by the name of Abraham, the friend of God, the man who dared to believe, and whose legacy echoes to this day as a symbol of unshakable faith.